to have Bevin as my co-panelist, because by listening to her, I know that we have an expert in communication, which I believe I'm going to be able to learn a few things from her to manage my own team. And I run a global team at Houlihan Lokey, and Houlihan Lokey is not as like a household name like IBM. Maybe I need to give you a little bit background what we actually do. We are an investment bank and publicly traded on the New York Stock Exchange, and so my focus is actually providing valuation services for our clients, and which we're including different type of asset managers, and like the PIMCO, some of the household names you heard about, and some of the hedge fund manager, private equity firms. And what do I mean by valuation? Is like, for example, is there is a building out there, people need to know what the value, we can value it for you. And if you hold if you lend money to the owner that own the building, what is the value of that loan? We will value it for you. And you go and borrow money from the federal government, and that loan get packaged into some kind of security. We can value that security. So that basically is is what we do. But let me apologize. One thing is that you can tell that I have an accent. I was born and raised in Hong Kong, and so I came here for college and graduate school. And so despite I've been here for 20 years, I still speak with an accent. So I always cautions my clients, my team members, ask them to have patience with me because I speak Chinglish. I don't really speak English. And so I'm asking the principal here would do the same thing. I'm actually also on the board of Pencil, and starting this year, I'm very, very interested in working with the principal. Is in a sense is I'm thinking about my own background was because I grew up in a very poor family in Hong Kong, so I never really have the financial means or the privilege to go to a private school. So I came through the public school system and got a scholarship and came to the U.S. and get scholarship to go through get through college and got my PhD. So I believe that education is always give me the way to actually to build a future. That's why I believe in Pencil. I believe that I want to work with all of you to actually also kind of try to provide more support to the students, to give them the hope that that you can actually, with good education, believe in education, you actually can have a good career. That basically is my background.
Thank you, Cindy. I'm going to stay with you for a minute because you actually started to kind of dig in on things that you ask of your team, like patience and things like that. Can you describe a little bit about your management, particularly team management philosophy and techniques? How do you approach supporting and leading a team?
Yeah, I think the most important thing is that people truly need to understand what does it mean by a team? What does it mean by being a member on the team? And I play team sports, and so I know that if you play team sport, you know that everybody work together for a common goal. One person from that team wins, the whole team wins. That is the concept we want to make sure. My team member actually understand. And from day one, we always tell the team is team means we, but then we start with W, right? But if people actually have the wrong idea and invert the W, then it become an M, then it become me. So you never want to turn a we into a me. And that's just kind of the culture you need to build up. And also is we try to make sure that the team understand that we cannot achieve any goals without the other people. And you want to build that, if someone have issues, have challenges, it's just not a shame to actually let other people know that you need help. But then in order to do that, you basically need to make sure that is trust, with the team member. Then as a team leader, that means that you need to play very, very fair. And when I remember when I was in school, people always kind of laugh at me and say, oh, you are the pet student. That means teacher like you. So you go up and ask the principal or ask the teacher to get things. That's just not the way we want to run the team. There is nobody a favorite. Everybody are treated equal. And and also is we always try to do what is right for the team, and also what is correct for the client. And so from that perspective is like I mean for the principals, I would tend to think the team is all your teachers and your colleagues, and technically the student could be your client, but like clients not always right, but you always have to, like sometimes you have to deliver tough messages to the clients. And always also believe that, like I mean never ask your team members, your teammates to do things that you're not ready to do it yourself. So I think leading by example is also like very important. And because I recall when I was like, I mean, when I was a staff accountant working for one of those big 8, now the big 4, and on the weekends I could see that, like I mean, the partners, they're all gone sailing, golfing, and what do? I got locked up in the office and try to do the work for them. And so I basically said, if I were the team leader, I would never want to do that to my people, because that's very demoralizing. And I think communication is very important. And I used to expect people to know what I was thinking, and expect them to like do what is in my mind. And over the years, I realized that no, nobody actually know what you were thinking if you didn't spend time to, like I mean, to tell them. So I getting to the point is like to try to be more communication, or tend to be over communicating.
Yeah, all great tips, and I think we're going to be digging in on a lot of those themes as we go. Bevin, same question. If you can describe your team management philosophy, and I'd add a layer to it as you're talking. What do you think is still holding up? What's the non-negotiable in your own strategy in this new world that we're all operating in?
Sure. And Cindy, I have an accent too, which is from Brooklyn, so I speak Brooklynese. And I actually went to public high school in New York. So I went to John Dewey Public High School out in Bensonhurst, which we sometimes pronounce Bensonhoist, and had an amazing public school education in New York. And my mom was a New York City public schools teacher, and then later worked for Charlotte Frank at the Department of Education, creating the Department of Curriculum Development. So I grew up in going to schools and stuffing teachers' mailboxes with flyers, and being a part of an experimental high school, which really changed who I became as an adult. And I sometimes honestly think about lessons that I learned in management in high school. Going to an experimental high school, one of the things that I learned was we ran our own dance company, and we would go out and perform all over New York City at like 15 years old. Great experience, and how to be a team leader and make sure that everybody showed up on time and that we did what we were supposed to do. I think when I think about my philosophy today and us as a company with the IBM company, you really have to go back to what's your purpose in the world. And I think for us, our purpose in the world is to be essential. And as we were facing a pandemic, we couldn't let go of that. It wasn't like we got to say, well, it's a pandemic, we can't manufacture mainframes. We had to figure out how to make that safe and feasible for our employees who were going to actually go into plants and manufacture our mainframes. For our clients, we had to figure out very quickly how to make sure that we were still serving our clients, even though in a lot of places in the world we were in lockdown, we weren't allowed to go to our clients' locations. So I would say it really falls into what is your purpose, and being really true to that basic of what's the purpose of what you're doing. Being agile in how you do that. I mean, that's one of the things that we faced in a pandemic, was we had to figure out very quickly and iterate, because the first time we did it maybe wasn't right. So iteration, which is a foundation of agile methods, it was really important. And the last is empathy. I mean, we found that we're closer to our clients. In a lot of ways, we're closer to each other, and really bringing empathy into every touch point has been so important. We have values as a company, and I feel like going through this pandemic with my colleagues and our clients has really grounded us in what our values are. So whilst it's been very hard, we've also found that we've had some things accelerate faster because we're in this very different kind of situation. I think I would say for like tips of managing through this kind of different experience, because you're managing your teams, you don't get to manage by walking around. which I know, having grown up with a New York City public school teacher mother, the principals were always walking around. You never knew if they were going to pop into your classroom as a teacher. I remember as a little kid, every principal of John Jay High School, patted me on the head and knew exactly who I was as the child of one of their teachers. Is that idea of you have to figure out what's going to work in this situation. So I try to be really clear with my team when we're going to have digital meetings. If we use WebEx, our clients often are on Zoom or other platforms. What's the goal of us being together in that meeting? I think sometimes people default to 1 hour meetings, which you don't usually need. If you actually gave everybody the materials ahead of time and they read them and they showed up and you said, the purpose of this meeting is, and then you can have a discussion. Do we need to, am I clear? Our CEO, Arvind Krishna, says, you sometimes have meetings to give information. You sometimes have meetings to have a discussion, and you sometimes have meetings to make a decision. You have to be clear on what do you want from people. Are you just going to give them information? Are we going to discuss it? Or is it really, we're going to get to the point where we're making a group decision? Mm-hmm. So those are some of the things that I've found to have worked well. I try to also make sure that we never leave a meeting without what's the action. What are we going to do now that we've had this meeting? Because otherwise you can just basically become a servant to your calendar and just going from meeting to meeting to meeting to meeting and nothing ever gets done.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So let's build on that. Cindy, what are meetings, and best practices looking like for you and your team at Houlihan Lokey in this setting? Are there any specific technology platforms you're using? What does that look like right now?
Yeah, actually, I just learned something from Bevin. You're correct, Bevin. I have been zooming from one call to another call. You look at my calendar, it's like every day is back to back with Zoom calls. So we basically use Zoom right now as a platform for us to to communicate. And we were actually surprised ourselves that the whole firm actually went remote. And everybody dialing, going back, working remotely. And at first is our system we're able to hold up. And second, also surprised with with the communication provider, they were able to actually provide that service as well. That is amazing. And so we are getting to the point is even when the pandemic is over, I'm just questioning whether people still want to to have at least a part of the week to be working from home as well. So technology become a very important part. And as I mentioned, we use the corporate version of Zoom, and more or less the Ring Central. Because one thing we don't use WebEx is because it does not allow you to to see the person, and able to to see each other on the screen still provide us that human touch, and which is actually we learn is actually very, very important. And also is at this stage is because it used to be we can go out the hallway and go to the cubicles and see how people are doing. And right now we are actually relying on technology to help us to to do that the communication. And one thing that going back to the team concept, I actually believe that if you accept someone into the team, that means you trust that person. And if you trust that person, you need to treat them as a true professional. That tell them what is the result, what do you want them to do, and agree on the execution timeline, agree on the milestone, then let them go, let them do their job. Mm-hmm. And because micromanagement it's not a good thing. And then it's if you don't trust that person, never put that person on the team. Mm-hmm. So once you want that person on your team, you have to believe that he or she is going to be value add in. That's the way how we normally do. But right now we are using a Zoom, and I think everybody right now, I have actually I have 3 laptops opening on my table right now, and so technology is a very important thing. I would tend to think it's 10 years ago, if we had this pandemic, I would not believe that we'll be able to work remotely. Like, I mean, that's why I kind of like, I mean, need to give a lot of like, I mean, credence and kudos to like, I mean, to Beaver and his company that actually like get us to like where we are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, technology is obviously becoming a critical element in every industry. I know our educators are experiencing that in having to deliver education virtually, but also connecting with each other virtually. Bevin, beyond communication tools like this one that we're on right now, what other technology tools or platforms are IBMers finding success with? I know you mentioned a couple when we were preparing for the conversation. What does that look like in how to convene teams on other types of platforms?
Sure. So we do a lot of things in Agile methodology, and Agile methodology was a software development method, which has actually then been applied to things like design thinking, which is how do you really get a whole group to think about problem solving in very different ways. So we love tools, and so we are huge Slack users. I find sometimes, like, when we were talking, Cindy and I were talking about, like, meeting fatigue. One of the things that I always ask myself is, do I really need to have a meeting, or can I set up a group? It's basically instant messaging on Slack, and and I am with 4 people where we just basically Slack each other and we can resolve the issue. I have, like, for my teams around the world, I have what's called a Slack channel. So I have a geography Slack channel. We'll put questions in there. So when my team is awake in Australia, they'll put a question in there. Someone will wake up in the morning in Europe, answer it, and the thing is done. No one has to schedule a meeting because we actually just are constantly talking to each other in that geo Slack channel. We also use something called Mural, which is basically, if you've ever done like a idea session where people are putting Post-it notes up on the wall, which you'll often do in design thinking, or you'll do it in an Agile session. It's a digital version of putting Post-it notes on the wall to come up with ideas and cluster ideas together. We also use Trello for project management, which is a great way of basically being able to keep track of project management. So there's a lot that we love to do. One of the things that was a challenge for us, and some of you may not know, that we have a school in Brooklyn called PTech, which is on Albany Avenue in Brooklyn, which is a different approach to high school and an associate's degree. So it's because we love acronyms. It's the Pathways. I have to check it. It's the Pathways in Technology College High School. So it's a college high school. You end up with a 2-year associate degree when you come out of it. We've been doing PTech all around the world. We have, I think, 250,000 students around the world who are in a PTech school. And one of the things that we have done is we were challenged by the pandemic to say, how can we actually digitize some of what we do in PTech and open source that? So basically make that available to educators and students anywhere in the world. So we've launched something called Open PTech. It tends to be curriculum, and this might be helpful for some of your teachers, especially I know at the end of the school year, being a mom, kids tend to get a little bit like distracted. And so it really focuses on curriculums in design thinking, in technology. It might be stuff that might not be part of their normal curriculum, but it's really about breaking the digital divide based on economics. So it's really opening up different kinds of digital careers to people who maybe wouldn't have had those in the past. So Open PTech is now available in English, Portuguese, and we just launched Spanish last week. So that might be a really good tool for everybody. One of the things for us and for our corporate citizenship team was how quickly we said we have to move this to a digital platform in order to be relevant and to still be useful and serve our purpose in the world. So I offer that up to everybody as a digital tool that might be helpful.
That's great. Thanks, Bevin. I know a lot of our educators are quite familiar with PTech. It's great to hear about the open source opportunities that are available now. With all of the platforms that you mentioned, Bevin, between Mural and Trello and then again just meetings and Slack, can you talk about how you continue to maintain kind of motivation and excitement on your team, and not have burnout with all of these different demands that are coming at us? I know that that's something that our principals are really grappling with, because education, particularly in this environment, some of our teachers and educators are talking to students at midnight and trying to manage curriculum development and all those pieces. Can you talk a little bit about to that theme?
I think everyone's really been struggling with this. I think it's very easy to just never leave your desk, to never get out of, I'm here in my basement right now, to never leave my basement. And I think that I was telling Jessica before we started the call that we're actually doing something called a jam right now at IBM, which is 3 days of ideation and building on ideas to look at where we go in a post-COVID world. And one of the areas that we're talking about is how do you actually avoid burnout? And we had, we've been doing a lot of tips and hints for employees. We've been doing a lot of mindfulness. Opening up, we have a mindfulness community within IBM, so people train to be able to do, just employees trained to do it for fun, and they become mindfulness experts. And so people have been running mindfulness sessions on just like Slack channels. They've been doing video versions of this. We've also found that a lot of transparency, like as Cindy was saying, a lot of communicating is really important right now, and really being available to each other. So having times that you can be together that are not about deadlines. We found a lot of teams are doing sort of bringing back the water cooler. How do you make sure that you're talking to each other about just stuff? We had a Slack channel that was just about joy in teams. So they would just post things of, what was going on? What did you see outside your house? How is it trying to be a homeschool educator to your kids? What's it like to live in a 600 square foot apartment in Manhattan as a single and not get to go into an office where, you were with people and you had other 20-something-year-olds? So we've been trying to try all kinds of different things to keep people from getting burned out. And I thought I would just share one thing, which is, let me see if I can do this quickly. We actually started a work from home pledge, and we wrote this as a community, and then we shared it, and people can do this if they want. And can you guys see that okay? Mm-hmm. And it was, I pledged to be family sensitive. I pledged to support flexibility and personal needs. I pledged to support not camera ready times, because we spend our lives on WebEx cameras. I pledged to be kind, set boundaries to prevent video fatigue, take care of myself, check in on people, and I pledged to be connected. So that was one way that we started to try and help each other as a community get there. And I think one of the things that started for us was when the pandemic first started in China. One of the things we did was there's a expression in Mandarin called "jiao," which is what you yell at a sporting event. It basically translates to "add oil." And so we started an Add Oil Slack channel, and everyone in the company started adding videos and greetings to really support our colleagues in China who were feeling very separated at that time. Mm-hmm. And then it just sort of started the right tone across the whole company that we were going to support each other through this.
Mm-hmm. That's great. And thank you for sharing that. And I think people would like to get a copy of that pledge if you're willing to share, and we can email it out to folks so that they can use it as inspiration for their own. Cindy, what about at Houlihan Lokey in terms of supporting that team culture, making sure people are cared for, making sure people aren't on client calls 24/7? How is that working there?
Yeah, it's actually kind of difficult to kind of make sure that people don't burn out, because you technically can work 24 hours, right? In the old times that we, like your commuting time, you're dining out, you're going out, going out to meetings, kind of break up the day. But now it's even myself, I can wake up at early in the morning, you turn on the computer, you can literally sit in front of the computer talking and working until the whole day. So our human capital group actually have been very good in terms of like partnering with some external vendors that offer a lot of virtual sessions as how to stay in shape. So we got like medication, we have like yoga class, and diet and exercise, cooking tips and all that for people like me that want to join. And actually, I think in terms of transparency, like we used to have lots of meetings or calls that would be only limited to like officers or like up to certain rank. But like with the pandemic, people know that we need to like to provide more information to people. So most of the meeting actually, instead of like limited to like people at a certain rank, we open up a lot more discussions, a lot more information is being provided and shared with our staff, especially the junior staff. And because they used to be working like in the bullpen with the friends and colleagues, and now they got locked up by themselves. They actually feel lonely. So we want to make sure we provide more information to them. And also a lot of times, I say when they hear about like there is unemployment, other banks are laying people off. So if they're all by themselves, they don't feel good. So we want to make sure we reach out to them. And despite technology is still the best, we actually believe the human touch is still the right medicine. I.e. is like we actually ask all our officers, pick up the call the person. Don't just like send an email, don't send text, don't send email. Actually, I think like the staff actually really appreciate when they pick up the phone. It's just like a senior management actually on the call asking, how are you doing? And that actually even a 5 minutes conversation actually make them feel very good. So we actually make sure that we tell people, pick up your phone, call. Do not just send an email or a text to ask people how they were doing. That's just kind of like, we know technology, but that is we need the human touch in the current situation. So and we know that it actually needs very creative to get people together. For example, we just finished like a huge project. So what we did is like the people on the project team, we actually send each person 2 bottles of wine, and then invited them to like a virtual happy hour. So kind of like so you need to do little things. You don't need to spend a lot of money, but all these like little things that people like care. In the current situation. And we have people that work long hours, so we have to make sure that that dinner you're going to get paid for. And so after they work 14 hours, it's nice that that dinner delivered to that door to say thank you. So little thing like this is what kind of make people feel kind of motivated and still be like part of the team.
Yeah, and it sounds like a big theme there, aside from the personal touch that you're talking about, Cindy, is really transparency. The idea of opening up lots of meetings to different levels of the organization. I think that's a really good tip and theme. Bevin, you work at IBM and managing global teams. How does transparency operationalize there, and any additional tips on that theme?
I think one of the things that, in terms of transparency, and I think this is really about, I would say probably more how educators work with their staff, as opposed to, I'm sure with, students, you still need to make sure they're doing what they are supposed to be doing and on track. But I think that one of the things that we've seen is shared workspaces. So the idea of when we're working on something together, trusting that people are going to do what they, it's kind of like what Cindy said, trusting people are going to do what they need to do. And one of the ways of doing that is actually having collaborative spaces where people can post their results, their work product, making things, that whole idea of transparency, I'm seeing that a lot more, our ability to, and our need to be transparent with people, because it's not like there can be, the buzz in the hallway or the water cooler, or sort of everyone knows what's really going on. You have to be really clear with people on what it is you want from them, when you need it from them, and then the ability to co-create I think maybe one of the things that working remotely has forced everyone to do is, I can't keep my stuff in my, on my laptop and not share it till I'm 100% sure. I need to really open that up. And that's one of the things that, I find now we use something called Box, and we co-create and we edit and write and do stuff in Box and Box notes. We put the stuff in Box folders so that we can work in different ways, right? I mean, one of the things I've found with my team is like, I have a lot of my younger employees have actually gone back to their parents' house. One, they want to take care of their parents, but two, they don't want to be in their 600 square foot apartment for the entire pandemic, so they went back to their parents' house. But now they're sort of getting the sense of what it's like to have older parents. And, I had an employee today who said to me, I'm going offline, got my mask, got my gloves, got my mom, and we're going to go to the grocery store before, Louisiana reopens tomorrow. I have to be, that's probably something she would not normally tell me. So I have to be empathetic that she's taking care of her mother, that she's trying to keep her mother safe. And that, there's going to be this, a lot of information that we're going to have about each other in this world. But then I also have to make sure that I'm supporting her, right? That I'm saying, you know what, that's okay. You can go out for an hour and a half in the middle of the day, as long as you didn't have a deadline with me, this is a perfect time to go take your mother shopping. Right. So I think that that kind of transparency of how we live, how we work. We've had cats in meetings, we've had children in meetings, we've had to be more transparent about our work so we can get stuff done. And I think that, that's sort of some have been the good side of having to work really differently.
Yeah, I think, Bevin, that resonates with a theme that we actually heard from our principals. We had our principals panel, which was this new environment is leading to just more information about, your colleagues and everything, but also a lot more flexibility, whether it's hours or process or what schools get to do. And that principal, Karen Polsonetti, was saying that she hopes that trend continues, the ability to be flexible, the ability to have more latitude as educators. And so, Cindy, want to kind of pivot to this idea of what's here to stay. And you alluded to some of it earlier about people not maybe wanting to come back to the office to work every single day. What are some, management practices, leadership practices that you think this situation will leave its mark on and will continue regardless of a public health crisis?
Well, actually, I think going back to the point that Bevin actually mentioned is I think people become more empathy, and people become really care for each other, and that also I could see a lot of my younger staff become more health conscious. They started to think about eating the right food, and try to exercise more. Because especially, in this stage of age where you don't have a vaccine. So basically it's your immune system. It's your body going to help you to survive. So I'm actually seeing people pay more attention from a health perspective. And in terms of transitioning back to work, I think it's going to be challenging, right? Because it's if you don't allow more than 3 people in an elevator, and I already calculated that I either have to walk up 25 floors to go up to the office, or I had to wait for 3 hours. And and those kind of logistics you have to think about. New York has a lot of tall buildings, and how you're going to get people back to work. I think that's a challenge. And I'm already creating our own Houlihan Lokey facial mask, because we know that we're going to need a lot, and the client will like that. And then maybe we need to develop some gadgets that people don't want to touch an elevator, right? So you create some kind of gadget so they can use that to push elevator. So that's a lot of things I think our life is going to change forever. And the reason I'm saying that it's going to take a while for us to think about how to, even for Houlihan, is we actually at one point in time, we advocate open space so everybody can see each other. And now it's we try to pack as many people as possible so that they're intimate. And now the question is we most probably have to make sure that they are 6 feet apart. So who get to come to work? Who get to move to another floor? Already can envisioning people will be oh, I don't want to move there. I'm going to be like off from my team. So there's a lot of those issues we have to deal with. And also I think the challenge, it will be like, going back, even though we trust our people, but you're going to bound to have like, people maybe using people's a fear of the pandemic. So they say, I'm not going to come to work. I have that fear. What are you going to do with that? You can't fire them. And there's kind of, and also, that certain people are going to abuse the system. But those are the challenges I think we have to deal with. It's going to be like part of management, part of the cost. How are we going to do it? I think the principal is going to have the same problem. It's like, the kids the student going back to school, but how are you going to be able to fit all the kids? Or are you going to like break up the classroom? And you have to put them into different classes, then you need more teachers. And I think our public school system already have a lot of challenges. So there's a lot of issues. Sorry that
just to build on that and to kind of pivot it to just a very concrete idea here. Schools likely are going to have to think about physical space differently and time and schedule differently. As a manager, Cindy, as you just named all of the different things you're starting to think about, how are you just mentally preparing your team for that? What advice are you giving to your team members, your younger team members in particular, maybe about just how to be prepared for that, all those differences and that discomfort?
Well, basically, right now is actually a good time to make them remember they are part of the society. They have the social responsibilities. And so first they need to be grateful that they have a job and they have a good job. So there is a lot of discomfort right now because of the economy, because of the health system. But it just actually is kind of like but it is also the time that we need to how to deal with the challenges. And at the end of the day, we still need to be able to to serve our client, to deliver our work to our client. So we actually, but at the same time, we are very cognizant about different people had different tolerance about the pandemic. So I believe that we most probably going to start with on a more volunteer basis to see who really want to go back to work. Because eventually, to be honest with you, I actually believe that people eventually all want to go back to work because they've really bored to tears by working by themselves at home. That isolation sooner or later is going to get to them. But they may not want to go in for 5 days a week. So I think it's naturally you can easily break up the people to come in shift. And then the problem will be solved hopefully in about in 12 months, that when we have vaccine, once we get vaccine, then people can hopefully go back to normal.
And Bevin, I'll ask you kind of the same question, and also kind of tack on a question that we have in the chat here about kind of preparing a team for coming back to a very different normal. And the question in the chat is, are there any kind of management tools that principals and educators might be able to use to prepare teachers to be welcoming students back, even that next layer down of discomfort and change, but still maintaining a positive atmosphere? Any thoughts on that, Bevin?
So I when I read that one in the chat, the first thing I thought was, I think, how we always had school songs, and there's an old joke about, it was a Robert Klein joke about New York City, your school is named after numbers, and that we were the only place in the world where you would sing a pep song about IS 88. So and I was thinking, could each school sort of come up with their own way of people greeting each other that would not be shaking hands? And so could schools come up with their own sort of greeting that would be, our school's greeting that we invented ourselves, and that's how we say hi to each other as we come into school, and the principals and administrators could actually welcome the first groups back with that. I think the idea of owning stuff like that and co-creating is going to be really important. And I think for principals and for superintendents, I think something Cindy said about the idea of people volunteering to be the first ones to come back, I think that's going to be really important, because mandating things super hard, right? You know, if we could actually mandate the flu shot in New York City public schools, a lot of people wouldn't get the flu, right? But we have a lot of issues. I mean, the whole even if there is a vaccine in 18 months, we're going to have to deal with, are we going to mandate that you have to have a vaccine to come into New York City public school to be a student? So, you know, this is going to be a long, you know, we got a lot more than this webinar to think about this, because this is going to be a long-term solution. And I think Cindy's right. I think it's going to be, you know, how do you sort of leverage the population by starting with those that are going to volunteer, those that are going to come back first. And I've seen this as our teams have started to come back in Beijing, is that it's the ones who were like, please get me out of my house. I need my kids to go back to school. I need to go back to the office. They were the ones that first came back 3 times a week. Mm-hmm. But it's also protocols, right? You know, and the big difference is going to be what happens between now and September, I think, is, you know, this is going to force us to rethink the school year. It's going to force us to rethink how much is digital and how much is face-to-face. You know, it's, you know, one of the things that Ginny Rometty, who's our chairman, said that one of the things that she's seen, and she's a huge education champion, is that COVID has been disruptive, but it's also been an accelerant. It's forced us, especially in education, I think it's forcing all of us to think about some of these things really differently. Mm-hmm. You know, we've always been locked into where my kids went to school, we were locked into the time of day that high school started, and we would never change it, no matter how much there was a lot of churn and discussion about it. So I think how you build those consortiums of people, you know, your connections with your PTAs and with your parents and with your, you know, student governments, and all of that is going to be at a very different level, and not just like nice to do. I think it's going to be necessary to do. Mm.
So building on that, because you're touching on some of the empathy, right, that's necessary in this time, and because the accelerant was thrust upon people before they could really fully prepare, there's a question from a principal of how do we best convey high expectations to maintain a high standard of work, but also maintain the empathy at the same time. So Bevin, if you continuing on any thoughts that in that space.
I think it's you know, the same expectations that we have of our teams face to face. You know, one of the things I've always, you know, my teams have always said, one of the worst things that I can ever say to them is when I say, well, I think you're better than that. And, you know, they said that always cuts to the core, because they're like, you know, you had such high expectations for me, and I kind of slacked off on that one. So I think that maybe is the same, and it's just the way we're actually having those conversations. I've been trying to be really diligent with my time. Like I think of time as currency, and I want to make sure that I'm spending my currency. You know, Cindy talked about being fair. I'm trying to be fair with all my teams and how I'm spending my currency, because then I can set my expectations with them privately, as opposed to all of this group work that we're doing. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's private expectation setting. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Great. And Cindy, any thoughts on that topic of empathy and expectations at the same time?
I actually still go back to like stressing on the fact that the importance of over communicating, and also like creating more personal connections. I think is the key. I mean, to bring everybody back. When you bring people back, it's still like people will go back because they want to be part of the team. They want that sense of belonging. So I think that's just the theme that we're going to to use to bring people back.
Great.
And I think, Cindy, there's going to be an informality in how we communicate that's we're going to get really comfortable with. And I think that's one of the things, you know, we should think about in our different roles. I mean, one of the things that I found with our new CEO is he has office hours for his employees. For 325,000 people, he has office hours. People ask him all kinds of questions, and it's been fun because like we actually see what his home office is like, and we can tell which book behind him he's like read more because the spines are all kind of tattered. And you know, I think that the informality that this is allowed, you know, we're visually in each other's homes, I think helps you with your staff to be able to break down barriers and do that communications in a very consistent, constant way.
That's a great point. And I know we're just at time, and there's one last question I think it's apropos to wrap up with. Given that schools are about to approach the end of the academic year in June, and you know, I think each of you talked a little bit about celebrating your teams and acknowledging you know, great work or the completion of a project. Are there any last parting words or thoughts or suggestions about, you know, really good celebratory practices to acknowledge the hard work of a team that can work in a virtual format? Cindy, any thoughts? I know you talked about the sending wine. I don't know if we can facilitate all that, but what are your thoughts there?
I can't think of anything. I'm sorry. Yeah, it's going to be tough because I mean, but I have seen a lot of people like doing a celebration party. Everybody actually kind of like doing what we're doing in the Zoom basis, and I mean, they could be eating dinner, drinking while they're chatting with each other. Yeah, I don't have any creative ideas.
That's fine. That's fine. And Bevin, any thoughts from your?
I think one of the things that when I was reading that question that I really loved was, maybe it's the next question down, on embracing imperfections. We have an expression in our family that we always have a perfect set of 7, because no matter whatever set of glasses we've bought, we usually break one. It's, you know, it's being okay with things being not perfect. And I think that that's something that once we can say, you know, 80% is pretty good, if we can just sort of keep going. I think the stamina this is going to be a marathon, not a race for all of us. And I think keeping that in mind will help all of us.
Yeah. Great. Well, I think on that note, I think we'll wrap up today's program. For all of our educators, we will continue that. We always continue these conversations online on LinkedIn and Instagram. We typically post some key takeaways from these webinars, and we have recorded this. So if you knew another principal or educator that wanted to join, we'll be circulating a link to that for folks to be able to tune in at their leisure. But thank you all so much for joining us. We know it's an hour of your time, and as Bevin said, time is currency these days. So we thank you for spending some with us, and hope to keep the conversation going with Pencil and with our partners. But thanks so much, everybody. We'll be signing off now.